We know now that Sumerian literature consists primarily of epics, myths, and so-called wisdom literature.
They say every great civilization leaves behind ruins. But Samuel Noah Kramer didn't see ruins. He saw a warning written in clay. Before his death, he whispered a sentence that his colleagues refused to publish. He claimed the Sumerians didn't just invent writing, they invented a system that could shape belief itself. And the proof wasn't buried, it was hiding in every translation we thought we understood. Samuel Noah Kramer wasn't the kind of scholar who chased drama. He was quiet, careful, and respected. For most of his life, people saw him as the gentle translator of ancient clay tablets, nothing more. But something changed in his final years. His students noticed he stopped speaking with certainty and started speaking in fragments. He stopped calling the Sumerians the first civilized society and began calling them the first to understand control. The shift began when he noticed something other scholars ignored: sentences that didn't stay where they belonged. A line meant for temple hymns would show up in construction logs. Phrases used in prayers were found in ration lists and labor records. At first, he blamed lazy scribes or repeated formulas. But repetition, he realized, is rarely accidental in civilizations built on precision. And that's when he saw the first crack in everything he thought he knew. Kramer began tracing those strange repetitions across different cities: Uruk, Lagash, Nippur. The same sacred lines appeared in places that had nothing to do with worship. A blessing to a god showed up in a tax ledger. A ritual phrase used in coronations was copied word for word in a contract for grain storage. The overlap wasn't casual, it was deliberate, disciplined, and everywhere. Most scholars dismissed it as poetic language slipping into daily life, but Kramer wasn't convinced anymore. He started calling them the sentences that wouldn't let go. They crossed genres, centuries, and ruling dynasties like they were designed to survive everything else. These weren't just words. They were anchors.
They tried to hide it, but now you know. The question is, will you keep it to yourself, or will you let the world see? Hit that subscribe button, drop your thoughts below, and share this before the truth is buried again.
The more he followed them, the more one thought began to disturb him. Maybe writing in Sumer wasn't created to record reality. Maybe it was created to shape it. And that led him to the one phrase he could never ignore. There was one line that followed him from tablet to tablet: to raise the pure mountain and bind heaven and earth. At first, he assumed it belonged to temple ceremonies or hymns meant for the gods. But then he found the exact same sentence in a construction record for the Ziggurat of Ur. Not a variation, not a poetic echo. The same words, the same sequence, carved in the same tone. Why would a builder's log speak like a priest? Why would hauling bricks use the same language as summoning the divine? Kramer felt a chill when he realized it wasn't an error, it was a code written into the foundation of their world. Myth and mathematics weren't separate to them. Worship and accounting spoke the same voice. They didn't just mix the sacred and the practical, they erased the line completely. But the language was only the first clue. The stone was worse. Kramer stopped looking only at the tablets and turned his attention to what the Sumerians built. The great Ziggurat at Ur wasn't just an ancient ruin, it was a message in physical form. Rising out of the flat Mesopotamian plain, it looked like a stairway cut into the earth. To most, it was a temple. To Kramer, it was a three-dimensional text. He compared the language carved into the tablets with the structure of the Ziggurat itself. The phrases he found, ascend, purify, bind, measure, weren't just metaphors, they were instructions. The terraces were built in layers that matched the hierarchy described in their myths: the earth below, the sky in the middle, and the gods above. Even the king's titles matched the architecture. Some tablets called him the stair between worlds. To the Sumerians, climbing a structure was no different than reciting a ritual. But someone had to design the system that way.
Kramer realized that the ziggurat wasn't built by kings alone. It was shaped by the people who wrote the words that guided the stones. Behind every hymn, every tax list, every royal inscription stood the same hidden class, the scribes. They weren't just record keepers, they were engineers of meaning. In tablet houses across cities like Ur and Nippur, young scribes trained for years. They didn't separate religion from logistics. One day they copied hymns to Inanna. The next they recorded barley shipments. The language never changed. A symbol for God could also mean star. A sign for life could double as ration. This wasn't convenience, it was design. The same script that praised the gods, measured labor, and sealed laws. Authority didn't need soldiers if belief was already embedded in every sentence. But what disturbed Kramer most wasn't who wrote the tablets, it was how the tablets were built to last. Clay tablets were not fragile records, they were engineered permanence. Kramer noticed that the most repeated phrases survived across centuries, even when cities fell and kings vanished. Dynasties changed, but the language didn't. The scribes didn't just preserve stories, they preserved a blueprint. He found the same opening lines in myths, legal codes, ration logs, and temple chants, word for word. The phrasing didn't drift the way language normally does over generations. It was as if every new scribe was copying from a master script no one talked about. Even the numbers repeated with eerie precision: 3, 7, 12, 60. They showed up in offerings, building counts, festival cycles, and property divisions. Kramer began to wonder, were the Sumerians counting the world or programming it? The deeper he looked, the more one idea took hold. What if writing wasn't invented to remember the past, but to control the future? Kramer started mapping the repetition like a pattern etched into time itself. The same clusters of words, pure, bind, ascend, measure, divine order, appeared no matter the subject. A list of temple offerings used the same structure as a worker's ledger. A king's coronation text matched the phrasing of a trade contract. It wasn't imitation, it was synchronization. That's when Kramer wrote a line in his private notes that he never published. They were not documenting the world, they were aligning it.
He suspected the scribes weren't just witnesses to power, they were the architects of consent. The tablets didn't describe reality, they reinforced the belief that reality was already decided. And every person who read, copied, or obeyed those words helped keep the system alive. But the most unsettling piece wasn't written in clay. It was something he saw in the stones themselves, and it made him question everything. When Kramer returned to the ruins of the Ziggurat at Ur, he stopped looking at it as a monument and began reading it like a script. The terraces matched the structure of Sumerian hymns, layered, ascending, repetitive. The stairways were placed in the same directional pattern used in ritual texts. Even the shrine at the top wasn't just symbolic, it was the final sentence in a structure meant to be climbed and believed. He compared the measured dimensions of the bricks with the rhythm of the tablets. The numbers matched. The same divine counts, 3, 7, 60, were baked into the architecture. Construction wasn't labor, it was liturgy in stone. He wrote in his notes that the ziggurat was not where religion happened. The ziggurat was religion. And if that was true, then it meant one more thing. The builders were not the true designers. Kramer's colleagues thought kings shaped Sumerian civilization, but he no longer believed that. The rulers changed, the armies changed, the gods' names even shifted with time. But the language, its rhythm, its symbols, its repeated formulas stayed the same. That meant someone else was carrying it forward. The scribes weren't just trained, they were initiated. Literacy wasn't public knowledge, it was inherited, guarded, and enforced. Temple schools didn't just teach writing, they taught continuity. The same phrases survived empires, floods, and rebellions because someone made sure they did. Kramer wrote privately that the first real ruling class in history might not have been kings or priests, but the writers, the ones who shaped reality before anyone spoke it aloud.
But he didn't dare publish that theory. He feared it would be dismissed, or worse, ignored. So he saved one final realization for his last years. And that's when he started saying the sentence nobody could forget. In the final years of his life, Kramer stopped giving confident lectures and started giving warnings. He ended letters and interviews with the same quiet plea. "Before I die, please listen." To most people, it sounded poetic, but those who knew his work understood he was pointing to something he could no longer ignore. He believed the Sumerians had discovered the first real technology of control. Not weapons, not walls, but words. They built a world where belief and authority were written so tightly together that no one could separate them. Writing wasn't memory, it was maintenance. The tablets didn't preserve truth, they manufactured it. In one unpublished note, underlined twice, he wrote, "To rule the mind, one only needs to rule the symbols." He died before explaining what he thought that meant. But the real question he left behind wasn't about them, it was about us.